The rain came down in relentless sheets, drumming against the windows of the nearly empty diner like a warning. Inside, Emma wiped down the counter with practiced movements, her fingers numb from the draft that slipped through the cracks in the old door. The place was barely holding on, just like her. With rent overdue and tips drying up, most would have been thinking only of themselves. But Emma's heart was different. Her gaze lifted as the bell above the door jingled faintly. A tall man stepped inside, soaked from head to toe, cradling a small boy bundled in a worn blanket. The child's head rested on his shoulder, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in exhausted sleep. The man looked around, not with desperation, but quiet uncertainty. His clothes were simple, no umbrella, no luggage. Just a backpack slung over one shoulder and a tired expression that hinted at sleepless nights and too many miles. Emma hesitated only a second before walking over. "You both look frozen," she said softly, grabbing 2 cups and pouring hot coffee. "You want something warm to eat?" The man opened his mouth to protest, but she smiled. "It's on me." He met her eyes, searching for a catch. But there was none. In that moment, the warmth of the diner wasn't from the heater, it was from a young woman with nothing to spare, offering what little she had to a stranger. And neither of them knew yet how much that one act would change everything. Later that night, the storm hadn't let up. The streets shimmered with puddles, and thunder rolled like a warning in the distance. Emma stood in the doorway of her small apartment, soaked umbrella in hand, gesturing for Daniel and his sleeping son to come inside. "It's not much," she said with a shy laugh, "but it's dry and warm." Daniel hesitated, then stepped through. The apartment was tiny, just 1 bedroom, a faded couch, and a kitchenette, but it was clean, with the scent of cinnamon tea lingering in the air. Emma gently laid out a blanket and pillow on the couch. "You can have this for the night." "I'll sleep on the floor," she offered quickly. Daniel shook his head. "We can share the couch." "You've already done too much." Emma smiled, brushing off his gratitude. "You'd do the same." She heated up a can of soup and offered a slice of leftover bread. Daniel tried to protest again, but his son stirred, and the way he looked down at the boy, like he was his whole world, made Emma's heart ache. They ate quietly, the only sounds the storm outside and the clink of spoons against bowls. Daniel didn't say much, just watched his son with tired eyes and nodded thanks. Emma didn't ask for his story. She didn't press. To her, it didn't matter who he was or where he came from. All she saw was a father doing his best, and that was enough reason to let him stay. The rain had quieted to a soft patter by midnight, the storm losing its fury. The apartment was dim, lit only by the warm glow of a single lamp. Emma sat at the tiny kitchen table, sipping tea from a chipped mug. Across from her, Daniel sat quietly, his son finally asleep on the couch under the blanket she'd given him. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy, as if both carried more than they could say. Then Daniel finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "We've been on the road for a while. I needed to get away. He's had a hard time since we lost his mom." Emma looked up, meeting his eyes. There was a sadness there she recognized, because she carried it too. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "That kind of loss, it changes everything." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know what to do. So I just drove." Emma shared her story too, how her parents had passed when she was still a teenager, how she bounced between jobs and barely kept up with bills. No family left. Just her, holding on day by day. And somehow, that truth didn't feel like weakness anymore. Not here. Not with him. They sat together, 2 strangers bound by grief and resilience. No judgment, no pity, just quiet understanding. And in that fragile moment, something unspoken passed between them, the kind of connection only formed when 2 broken hearts recognize each other in the dark. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, casting a gentle glow over the small apartment. Emma stirred on the floor, her back stiff from the makeshift bedding. She stretched, rubbed her eyes, and glanced toward the couch, empty. At first, panic fluttered in her chest. She stood quickly, looking around. The blanket was neatly folded. The dishes from the night before had been washed and set to dry. But Daniel and his son were gone. Her eyes landed on a folded piece of paper left on the kitchen table. She picked it up with trembling fingers. In neat handwriting, it read, "Thank you, for seeing me when no one else did. I won't forget your kindness. Daniel." Emma stood there for a moment, the note pressed to her chest, unsure why her heart felt heavy. She hadn't expected anything from him, not money, not promises. But still, she felt the sudden ache of goodbye. She walked to the diner in the usual morning chill, expecting another day like the last, long hours, few tips, more bills waiting at home. But that evening, just as the sun dipped low behind the hills, a sleek black car pulled up outside the diner, so out of place, it made everyone stop and stare. Two men in suits stepped out. One approached her with a calm smile and handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter, a full scholarship to culinary school, and a check with more zeros than she'd ever seen in her life. She gasped. And then she cried. Months later, the air buzzed with quiet excitement as people gathered in front of a freshly painted cafe on the corner of the same street where Emma once walked home in the rain. The sign above the door read, "Emma's Table." Simple, warm, and hers. Emma stood outside in a soft blue dress, eyes shining, holding back tears as she looked around at the small crowd. Friends from town. The diner owner who once gave her extra shifts. Her culinary school mentors. And near the back, Daniel, in a crisp suit, holding his son's hand. She hadn't seen him since that night. But now, the truth was written across his posture, the way others greeted him. He was Daniel Carter, CEO of Carter & Company, one of the most successful hospitality empires in the country. He hadn't come to be seen. He stayed in the background, letting her shine. Emma stepped up to the microphone, voice trembling but sure. "I opened my door one night to a stranger with a child. I didn't know who he was or what he had. I only knew he needed help, and I could give it. That night changed everything. Not because of what he gave me later, but because I learned something powerful: kindness doesn't come from abundance. It comes from the heart." She looked over at Daniel, who gave her a proud, quiet nod. Her voice softened. When we lead with compassion, we don't just help others, we help ourselves become who we're meant to be. And with that, the doors opened.